take advantage of the areas where the question is less challenging, that can make answering the question as a whole become a lot easier. Phenomenal work. For today's session, did you want to keep getting practice on these support questions, or is there something else that you wanted to check in on? Yes. Let me just pull that open. And how did that end up going? Sure. Do you mind if I ask what your net score was? 1450. Lovely. And do you mind if I get these subscores as well? Got it, got it. Give me one moment while I poke around in my notes to think about that. Because I have expectations and I'd like to know if they're true. Okay, so on the whole went very, very similarly. Math was a very small amount weaker on this front, and we got the exact same score in reading, still consistently a noticeable amount of points better than Blue Book 10 when we took a look at that. So that's very exciting. Okay, do you mind if I get a list of the questions that we got wrong, starting in reading module 1? Powerful, exactly what I want to see. 25 is interesting. Looks to me like we've got maybe a words and context question, a couple analysis questions, looks like probably a grammar question, and then also a transition or rhetorical synthesis problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it, got it. The ones that clearly stand out there are the Math Module 1 errors and questions 10 and 11 in Math Module 2. Those are the ones that are likely to be on the easier side of things. 6, 7. Okay. In that case, do you want to start things off today by taking a look at the reading or math side of things? Can do. And we're starting in that reading module 2, question 5, which is words in context. This is a incredible words in context question. The vocabulary in this question is not very challenging. The entire difficulty of the question is figuring out what the passage is trying to say. And to do so, we need to be able to find the logical connections and to follow the fairly convoluted logical connections between sentences. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've not yet done the parsing of the claims here, or the parsing of the connections here. Let's take a look at this sentence structure. How does the first clause start? The word. And what phrase does the second clause start with? It is indisputable. Can I ask you to say an example sentence that uses this construction of while it is indisputable? Yeah. And go on. It's not contradicting it, right? It's not saying that cars aren't fast, but it's indisputable that this other thing is also true. And let's refine it a little bit further. Let's make it look even more like the structure of this sentence. While recent scholarship has undermined claims that John is the smartest person in the world, it's indisputable that what? What sort of thing could follow that up? I'm going to write it out in Adobe. Right. Go on. Well, what I'd ask you is what is the second part supporting? Is it supporting the recent scholarship? Or is this telling us why we thought that John is the smartest person in the world? So, locking back in on this question, this evidence, is it supporting the recent scholarship or the claims that they've undermined? Right. So, if his locations in Muslim-ruled area of what's now Spain meant that his works were primarily available thousands of miles west of the center's era of Islamic thought, that would support which of these answer choices? What would they assume about Ibn Rushd? There's one bad answer choice and then three that are plausible at the very least. Correct. That makes no logical sense. Hmm. Now, let's think about this very carefully. If he's very far away from these other people, does it logically follow that he's antagonistic? Is that a logical assumption to make? The distinction that I would make is that it is plausible that he might be antagonistic. But if we just say that two groups are far away from each other, we wouldn't assume that they dislike each other. It wouldn't be surprising if they were, but there's no reason to assume that it's the case. Which of these answer choices would you assume is the case if two groups were very far away from each other during the 12th century? Yes. It's inconsequential. We would assume that they would never see his writings in the first place because how would they even get their hands on them? Okay, this question is tough stuff. Even though all of the answer choices are really easy words, the sentence structure is really, really convoluted. And even if you understand the sentence structure, A and B are plausible enough that it is difficult to see why D is better than them. This question's really, really tough. For the first year that I taught the SAT, I think students' accuracy on this question, the first time they took the test, like before they'd gotten for me, was something about 25%. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. It's not particularly easy. Okay, well, let's take a look at a much easier question. Question 13. Poetry questions are functionally just another type of support question. Mhm. Yes. Does A even talk about poetry? Sounds like a good choice to get rid of it. Mhm. I'd be fine to eliminate C and I'd be fine to leave C. Um, if I'm leaving C, I'd be leaving C because I'm not 100% certain whether or not that ending is intended to be a merit. I don't like it does not scan as a merit to me, but it's obtuse enough that I might want to think about it at some point again in the future. Um, like I said, I'm happy doing it either way. Even if you eliminate an answer choice, like you can always just eliminate all four answer choices and then say, okay, I screwed up. I should look at something else down the line. Do we have ourselves a sense of displeasure? Double checking. Are there any words in here that you don't know? Can I ask you what the definition of contempt is? It is very different from being content. Contempt. Um, this one looks like it might be a vocab check one. Sorry is close to it, but contempt is intense dislike or hatred. Contempt is. Mhm. Yeah. D is a slam dunk answer choice, but a lot of people get vocab checked by contempt specifically. And if we don't know contempt, then we don't see that displeasure in D at all. Um, but I do want to clarify D's not saying reading poetry even if you hate it, it's saying reading poetry while hating it. That's when you get the genuine. Um, Not allowed to read it while liking it, clearly. Oh, I've been interacting with a lot of poetry lately, and I am not traditionally a poetry person. Tragically, I've become infatuated with trying to learn more about Sir William Blake's personal religion, and William Blake was fundamentally a poet. So, give me one moment while I look up some of the text of Emanations of the Giant Albion. I'm sorry, this is very unimportant, but I always need to share the start of this because um, the man just starts his poem this way with no context. That's a great question. So, I'd like to talk about Ulro real fast. Ulro shows up on page 12. What do you think the next page it shows up on is? 21. Um, in 21 is page 21 is the first time it defines Ulro, the space of the terribly starry wheels of Albion's sons. Um, just cold opens with Ulro. And Ulro is not like something that other people would recognize from outside concept. It is exclusively something in William Blake's mythology. Mans was wilding. That's all I've got to say. All right, thank you kindly for bearing with me. Let's lock in on this question 25. Not 25, 15, excuse me. We've got a population question over here. These are, of course, quite challenging. As always, we want to be able to break this down into what bullet points are important. If you were to summarize this using as few words as important, what are the important words and what do they sound like in common sense language? I think you might want to read the rest of the passage before trying to figure out what that means. Because you're not focusing on a very important part of it, and you might be able to find what is important about that first sentence once you've taken a broader look at the passage. I'm listening. And then go on. So you got one bullet point. You've got the Aztecs line of view, yeah? Mhm. And now that you know the Aztecs' point of view, how would you describe the first point of view? I'm going to take a lot of umbrage with this, but I'm going to talk about this after we've gone through the answer choices. We're going to show off some example problems, but first I want you to take a look at these answer choices with your current understanding. I will note that all of these, or many of these, are talking about what the Aztecs would think. Both the Aztecs and the modern ethicists will not change their opinions. If they agree, they might note the ways in which they agree. If they disagree, they might note the ways in which they disagree. Mm-hmm. Mm. And I noticed that you're eliminating D, even though, unless those actions led to different outcomes for the community. I'm sorry for making things way harder for you. Mhm. This is my big problem that I had with your initial take on the Aztecs view. Yes, it's in light of how well they accord with the individual's role in society and how well they contribute to the community. And you were missing the accorded with the individual's role in society. The example that I was going to give after the question would be um, in Aztec society, human sacrifice was routine. Would Aztec society say that a priest performing a human sacrifice would be okay? Would Aztec society say that a farmer performing human sacrifice would be okay? Yeah. And that's the example that I was going to give you, but you managed to cotton on to it. We've gotten rid of D. Good start. Which parts of this answer choice are standing out to you? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you want a guiding question? Which group talks about things that are good in all contexts? Do Aztecs believe there are behaviors that are good in all contexts? It's a mishmash of both of them. The first half is talking about something that's relative to the Aztecs. The second half is talking about something that's related to the modern ethicists. And C represents neither of their perspectives. I'm listening. Hmm. Well, we're down to the last two, so. And A is the correct answer, yes. A is just saying that the Aztecs would have disagreed with the modern ethicists and is explaining why they would have disagreed. Because they don't think that there's behavior that's always good, and instead they think that behaviors are good or bad depending on your role. For B, if B were the case, then that would mean that Aztecs would think that they wouldn't be able to judge the morality of people in other cultures. Like, they'd only be able to judge the morality of people in their own culture, right? I would be surprised if B were the case. There's nothing to support it, but I would also be surprised because I think that that has been true about no people ever in any culture. I'm fairly certain that pretty much everyone judges everyone by our standards of morality, regardless of what their standards are. I had something that I was going to say. What was it? It disappeared from my brain, got offloaded very quickly. Right, the moral ethicists. We formed a fairly good understanding of them by the time we ended. The basic idea behind moral ethicists is that if an action is good, it is always good. If it is bad, it is always bad. For instance, would a moral ethicist say that shooting a baby is good or bad? But what if the baby was baby Hitler? They would still say that it's bad. Yes, because shooting a baby is bad regardless of what baby you're shooting. And similarly, um, if giving a back, no, I don't know. I was going to come up with a good example instead, but then everyone that I could come up with was not one that I wanted to talk about because I wanted to talk about like doing something good for someone in a bad spot, and then I realized that wait a minute, I don't really want to perpetuate the assumption that people who are in a bad spot would repay, like would take something good and then do something bad with it. Like, I think that homeless people have enough on their plate without me reinforcing like stereotypes about, oh, you give them $5 and they spend it on alcohol, and like even if they do, who gives a shit? They might need that sort of comfort. Frankly, being homeless is really hard. um so then my brain got completely derailed. because I wasn't able to give an example that I was morally comfortable with. I think that morality is probably very complicated. That's my takeaway. I don't have like a detailed understanding of morality, other than I think it's tough. Um, I guess my understanding of morality is I'm really uncomfortable with certain elements of Christian morality and people trying to force that on others. So I'd like to find something that's a bit more permissive about that, and probably one that's looking at the net good of everyone involved. But I digress. That's not question 19. Now, I've got really bad news about question 19. First, can I ask you to identify what question type this is? It is not verb tense. It's verb tense and one other. Do you remember the other half of the dichotomy? Yeah. And do you remember how to tell a difference between the two of them? Has, have. Hmm. Was or were. And there's also one more, like walk versus walks. Now, I've got some really bad news. There's a question that no one's gotten wrong in a very long time that I saw yesterday. And it turns out that in very rare circumstances, verb tense questions can also have these pairs. Well, it's really important to know the difference between the two of them because we approach them completely differently. For instance, do you remember how the John strategy can instantly solve subject verb agreement questions? Which one agrees differently than the other three? In that context, can you tell me which one is right? And you're done. Answer choice C. Can you tell me what the subject that underlies referring to is? Would you say the idea underlie? Rather, it's ideological frameworks underlie. A framework underlies, multiple frameworks underlie. Yep. There's also, that's a compound subject, cultural and ideological frameworks. Like, even if you said something like John and Monish, you'd pair that with underlie because compound subjects are plural. All right. Do you want me to go into the really, really in depth breakdown of how to tell if it's subject, verb agreement, or verb tense? Or are you okay with one that this way of disambiguating between them that's accurate the vast majority of the time? Okay. It is a lot more confusing. Um, the big thing that I'll say is that if there is one or more answer choices that don't care about the subject's plurality, then it's verb tense. Like if you had underlie versus underlies, but another choice was underlied, well, John underlied. John and Monish underlie. It doesn't care if the subject is singular or plural. So underlied is a sign that it is verb tense. I could try to state it the other way for like these are the signs that it's verb tense. But there's a lot more options that make things verb tense. So, I'm going to have to iterate on this while before I find a more perfect solution. I'm very sad about it. It's only one question that's done it, too. That's what makes it so grating. Okay, then we've got a transition question to look at. All right, so first things first, how would you describe the relationship between these sentences in your own words? Are they. Mhm. Mhm. I really like that breakdown. Agreeing versus not agreeing is a very useful initial heuristic to apply, and you've even managed to refine that a little bit further. Are there any answer choices that definitely don't sound right to you? Yeah, it's contradictory. It's however. I'm so glad that you know that said. That transition specifically is the one that trips people up the most frequently. Hmm. And if we're talking about explaining, A is restating something in different words, and C is saying something that follows. Sorry, A and D, excuse me. That is absolutely correct. Yes. Excuse me. I'm slowly dying. It's very sad. Okay. Oh my gosh. In my wrap up email tab, I got jump scared for a moment. Because Shannon sent me an email. Shannon is my boss, and one of the really frustrating things about this job, really the only thing that's super frustrating about it, in my personal opinion, is that group classes are a lot of my income from PrepScholar, and they send out the sign up sheets for group classes just at random days in the middle of the month, at random times in the middle of the workday, and they're first come, first served. So occasionally I get flashbanged by getting an email from Shannon and I have to tell a student, I'm sorry, I need to take 5 to 10 minutes or else I'm going to lose several $1,000s. I really wish we had a different process. That's all that I'll say about that. Um, they're like going through a pre-selected set of just PowerPoint slides, basically, and me talking about things to give students a really overarching structural sense of what's going on in the test. At this point, I do not think that it would really introduce new information for someone in your position. Okay, I want to make sure that we lock in our sessions for this coming week. If I remember correctly, we like sessions that are a little bit on the earlier time. Um, I've got 3 p.m. sessions available Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Are any of those 3 p.m. slots of interest to you? Mm-hmm. Yes. Let's talk about Friday first. Friday, I could do 3, 4, or 5 p.m. EST. Got it. I'll log that one in. Tuesday, after 3 p.m., my next availability is 7 p.m. EST. And that is my earliest availability through the remainder of this coming week, other than the 3 p.m. sessions on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday would be at 3 or like 7, 8, or 9. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Then I will get those in the calendar, and as always, you are free to let me know if you need to change them. Bup, 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 bup. Tuesday at 3. Oh my god. And Friday at 5. And then Tuesday at 3 is 7:22 3. One of the things that we'll want to make sure that you do no matter what in your study for this coming week is we want to make sure that you're going to delve into those form, sense, and structure questions from the SAT question bank. And I'd specifically like you to practice differentiating between the subject verb agreement and verb tense questions in there. Uh, I've included this in the wrap up email, so you don't need to worry too much. Yes. That includes all of the grammar question types other than punctuation, so there will be other stuff in there. I just want to make sure that you're getting really, really good at identifying subject verb agreement questions because they're so formulaic, and it would be really nice if we got 100% of them right. If nothing else, then at the very least, understanding when one is subject verb agreement and when one is verb tense does a lot to make us more confident in the actions we're taking on those questions and speed up our process on them as well. Very powerful on a lot of different aspects. We've got ourselves 3 minutes remaining. You want to see if we can try out one more problem before we wrap things up? Now let's just do this question 17 in Math Module 1. Which would be 18. Mhm. You multiply one side by -1. You can either multiply the entire absolute value side by -1, or you can multiply the far side by -1. I usually like to make the far side negative instead, but you can do it to either side. No, we do this after you isolate the absolute value. I'd be talking about x minus 9 equals plus or minus 18. That might be what went wrong. That's also a very important distinction between how we're talking about our approaches. Usually, what I do is I say the absolute value of x minus 9 equals 18, and then I split it apart into two different situations. X minus 9 equals 18, and x minus 9 equals negative 18. It sounds to me like what you're doing is plus or minus x minus 9 plus 45 equals 63. This would work. I think that you either distributed this plus or minus over to the 45 as well, or didn't distribute it over to the 9 when you chose the negative route. I would expect that to be your error on the original problem, rather than what you're doing right here. That would make a lot of sense. And that would just give you the same result twice instead of giving you two different results. Okay. Absolute values aren't super tough, but if you don't have them down perfectly, it's very easy to make mistakes on them. This is my personal preference of how I set them up. I isolate the absolute value and then split it into two equations, and I multiply the far side by -1 in one of them. But putting a plus or minus here from the get-go is also very reasonable. We would note that once again we get to the far side being 18, and this time it would just be x minus 9 equals 18, or negative in parentheses x minus 9 equals 18. Am I a liar? Does that just not work? Yeah, but it did go on one side here. Give me a second. Huh. Something is going wrong when I'm taking this method, and I'm getting the opposite results of what I'd like. I will note that the first method that I take, which is the one that I do, looks like it works. Oh, I understand what the issue is now. I'm forgetting to distribute the negative to the x. Negative x plus 9 equals 18. X does equal negative 27. Yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm just bad at math. Except, no, it is supposed to be positive 27. What the hell? All right. My takeaways are I like my method. There's probably a good way to do it over here, but I'm not used to doing it this way, and something about it is screwing up. Given my current knowledge of how to solve this problem, my personal recommendation is to take the process I outlined here, where you isolate the absolute value sign and then split it into two separate equations from there. And then for one of the equations, you multiply the far side by -1. We should get to two solutions of positive 27 and -9, and that does work. Okay, but I'm going to have to leave you here because I need to